Please stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have the roll call for attendance.
Megan Doyle.
Present.
Scott Furmender.
Present.
Tracy Irby.
Here.
Tom Kova.
Mr. Kova is not here at the moment. We'll have another meeting, so we'll see.
Lauren Mahler.
Here.
Una Petrosky.
Here.
Christina Preet.
Here.
Michael Smith.
Here.
Cindy Wolf-Boynton.
Here.
And Susan Glennon.
Here.
9 members present.
Okay, thank you. Turn the meeting over to Dr. Kutaya for the next Generation Accountability Report.
And I will turn things over to Mr. Altieri, just like that.
Good evening, Ms. Glennon, members of the Board of Ed. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be able to share our next generation accountability report with you this evening. And for the accountability report, I'll talk a little more about the data that it covers. For the majority of the report, we're talking about last school year, so the school year that ended on June 30th, so the 22-23 school year. There are some exceptions to that, and I'll make sure that I intentionally point that out as we go through. In terms of graduation rates and things like that, there is a slightly longer delay to how the data is reported. So coming around to you, you should have a copy of the slides for this evening. And Ms. Griffin will also be sharing with the board tonight a copy of our district profile and performance report as well, which will accompany the presentation. So what is the Next Gen Accountability Model? And it really is a series of 12 different indicators that cover a range of different measurements and metrics. And this all dates back to the time when we solely relied on a district's performance based on state test scores, standardized testing measures. And as the model was created, it was really designed to not only track performance of districts, to celebrate successes, but then also to make sure that we had a holistic representation of how our students were performing as well as our schools. And really the design of the model is to support transparency with our stakeholders in terms of how the district is performing on multiple measures. The model originally came out and was released in August of 2015, and it was in alignment to the legislation around what's called ESSA, or Every Student Succeeds Act. So there, as I mentioned to you, there are 12 indicators. I'm not going to detail them here because we're going to talk about them individually tonight as we go through. But I do want to point out that you will notice after certain measurements on this particular slide, there is a little H that is in superscript. And that H represents what's known as a high needs group. And the high needs group really encompasses 3 different student groups. Our multilingual learners, our students with disabilities, and our students who are receiving either free and reduced lunch. So it takes in the economic factor of our learners as well. So there's certain metrics that are designed to look not only at all students in totality, but also students that fall into one of those 3 groups or multiple of those groups and are considered high needs. So we could really think of the Next Gen Accountability Model from the state as 4 buckets. And those buckets are the academic bucket, which includes things like test participation. We also have academic achievement, which is really the 1-year snapshot of how students have performed on a particular assessment measure. But even more, we now also think about it in terms of growth. And that's really important because a lot of the prior accountability models that the state used did not look at how students are growing and cohorts of students are growing from year to year. The second bucket looks at absenteeism in terms of chronic absenteeism, and again, that's for all students as well as high needs students. Post-secondary preparation, which includes coursework as well as post-secondary readiness, which is often ascertained by results on certain tests such as the SAT or advanced placement examinations. And then lastly is our PE and arts bucket. So if we're really talking about looking at students holistically, we know that arts, visual and performing arts are just as important of a component of a student's preparation and education as any of the core academic indicators are. So in order for us to really understand the model, and there's a lot that goes into this model, I want to start with a little bit of 101 on what the Next Gen Accountability Model looks at. And there's several components that you will see on each of the tables this evening. And really this is just a way for us to think about how to read these reports. So the first one is the indicator. And the indicator really is a description of what's being measured. And you're going to notice that each indicator is assigned a number. And then as each indicator is detailed, there are also letters that are assigned to further delineate whether it's, for instance, indicator 1, we're looking at English language arts, mathematics, science. The next one over is what's called the index or rate. And when we look at indicator 1 is measured as what's called an index. And what that means is they are looking at a calculation to figure this out. So all of the standardized assessment measures that the state uses are measured as a scale score. And we know that if we're talking about SBAC or NGSS or SAT, all of the scale ranges for that test differ. So in order to be able to figure out performance of students across particular grade levels as well as across the entire school or district, we need some way to get those scores all on the same continuum. So the index is typically measured on a range of 0 to 110. And the reason it doesn't go to 100 is if we're talking about growth of students from year to year, let's say that a student reaches their growth target, but then also exceeds it. The state wanted to develop a model that encountered for the fact that a student may surpass the goal that was originally set. So the total range goes from 0 to 110. When we're talking about determining the index, what they're doing is they're taking that student's scale score and they're subtracting it by the lowest score in that score range. So if, let's say, the range is a 2100 to a 2400, they would take that student's scale score, they would subtract it from 2100, and then they would divide by the total scores in that particular range. So if it's 50, they would divide by 50 if it was 50 points between the low range and the high range. And that's a little bit of the math on how they arrive at that index score target. Indicator 1 is measured as an indice as I just described. The rest of the indicators of the Next Gen Accountability Model are actually represented as percentages. When we talk about target, which is the next column over, this is a state-assigned goal for all Connecticut districts to meet. And these state-assigned goals were created back in 2015 when the state was working towards meeting the ESSA milestones. So for instance, if we're talking about the indice number 1, by school year 2029 to 2030, the expectation is that all districts would reach 75 for indicator number 1. So that third column over really is the target score that is for districts to achieve. The points earned, basically what they're doing is they are taking the index or rate, dividing it by the target, and converting that to a points earned score. And the state has created a maximum number of points that are available to districts to earn for that particular indicator. So you'll notice for, in that little picture, indice 1A, that particular district earned 47.1 points. They divided by 50, which gives us a percentage of points earned of just over 94%. And then the final column is the state average and their percent of points earned. So it's giving you a comparison between how the district is performing compared to the state as well. So you have multiple measures there. I just want to pause, ask if there's any questions there before I go on.
Smith? Oh, I'm sorry. Any questions? Just confusion.
Question.
Yeah.
So it all builds on itself.
Mhm.
It all builds, it's all percentages, column, building onto column.
Correct.
So since it's starting from the index and it's aiming at the target, and the
Mhm.
target is 75, does that mean that I don't have an actual like calculator in front of me to answer this question myself.
Mhm.
The percentage of points earned and then compared to the state average of percentages of points earned, those are based on that target of 75 rather than 100.
Correct. It's based on the target of 75. So if you did the 70.7 divided by 75, you would still get that 94%. The state then converts that. They prorate those scores towards their particular model. So the state uses the 50 as its possible points for districts to earn as part of our next generation accountability model.
Okay. Okay, so it builds off the
Yeah.
50. Is the 50 related to the 75?
50 is the possible points that a district could earn if they reach that particular ESSA milestone.
Right, so if they got to that 75, it would be the 50.
They would get the 50 points,
Okay.
yep.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. So as we take a look at the first metric, indicator number 1, which is the academic achievement, this is really defined as we mentioned, overall student performance for ELA, math, and science as well. And our Smarter Balance assessments are given in grades 3 through 8. SAT is administered in grade 11 for ELA and math. And then the Connecticut alternate assessments are given to students that have a cognitive disability that would not allow them to be able to fully participate in the traditional Smarter Balanced assessment. As we mentioned, this is a snapshot. It's designed to give us a one-year measure of where students are academically at the particular time of testing. It does not compare at this point a year-to-year growth metric. So this particular table is our achievement scores, and you'll notice that number 1, A and B, focus on English language arts, 1, C and D are math, and 1, E and F are science. And we are exceeding state averages in performance for all of our high needs subgroups, which is terrific. That's meaning that we are working towards making sure that all of our students, all of our learners are meeting our academic standards and are being successful. However, as we look to go on, the work that we're doing in our schools now is really focused on building some of the supports, not only in the area of science, but also in mathematics, to make sure that we're supporting the students in those high needs subgroups as well. Indicator 2. So I mentioned indicator 1 is all about a snapshot of achievement. Indicator 2 is really about academic growth. And I mentioned to you at the start of the presentation that each year, a student is assigned a potential target for them to achieve on, we'll call it Smarter Balance. So they may need to make 24 points of growth from grade 3 to grade 4. So at the end of the year, when the student takes the assessment in grade 4, they're given a scale score. And what the state does is they determine what percentage of that score did the student make. So if they only made 12 points and they were targeted for 24, they met 50% of their growth target. So the growth target really allows us to track individual student growth. The other piece to that metric is there's what's called the average target achieved. And the average target achieved is where they basically look at each student and say, student A made their target, student B made their target, student C did not. And they do a yes, no, and figure out what percentage of students met that target and how much of that target was met. So it gives us the ability to see, are students A meeting their growth target, and B, how much of that target is being met. So it gives us a couple different metrics to look at students' growth. In this particular table here, you're looking at ELA and math growth for both all students as well as the high needs groups. Again, this is work that as we continue to look at and break out some of our subgroup populations to be able to look at growth and understand where our students are, we are continuing to make sure that we are looking at strategies in the classroom to make sure that all of our students are successful. We're doing a lot of work now, as you've heard, around instructional routines and really focusing in on strategies in the classroom. For instance, the literacy classroom, Ms. Morrow has been working with teachers to start thinking about small group strategies and conferring strategies with learners. And we're doing the same process in the math classroom as well. So definitely taking a look at the way that we approach instruction and making sure that all of our students have the supports that they need. In the same category as the assessment is the participation rate. And we do not receive a score for participation rate. However, the standard for districts is to achieve 95% of students participating in the assessments. And this particular metric is determined based on the students that are registered in the district as of October 1st of each year. So those are the students that are counted for us. And while there is no metric score given, it can actually cause the district to be decreased a category level in terms of performance if we fall below that 95% rate. So they're really trying to make sure that students are taking the exams and making sure that they are having that opportunity. So I'm very pleased to announce that we did meet all of our participation rates for both all learners as well as our high needs students. Across the board for ELA, math, and science, we were above the 95% threshold. Indicators E and F in terms of number 1 talk about progress towards English proficiency. And specifically here, we're looking at our multilingual learners. And each multilingual learner every year takes what's known as the Lost Links examination. And the Lost Links examination is actually broken down into 2 composite scores. Students receive a oral score as well as a literacy score. And there are 4 different tested domains that comprise these 2 scores. So for instance, the literacy score is based on reading and writing, and the oral score is based on listening and speaking. So for our particular group of students, and really excited that our growth is substantially higher than state average. And I know, Ms. Akampora is working really hard with our multilingual learner teachers to think about our models of instruction, being able to support some more push-in opportunities for the teachers to go in and work with the students in the classroom during the core instruction. So we're continuously looking at our instructional model to determine what fits the needs of our students. Typically, there's a balance of push-in but also pull-out depending on where a student is with their language proficiency and acquisition. Students who are typically recent arrivals usually get a little more intensive support, one-on-one support, since they are in those early stages of learning the language. They're in that pre-emergent stage. This is one that I'm really excited about, and it just shows the work that the district has done prior to my arrival here. As you have all heard, and I'm sure over the last few years, coming through the pandemic and out of the pandemic, chronic absenteeism across the state was an incredible, complex problem that the state and the districts have had to deal with. And remember that chronic absenteeism is defined as absences that are 10% or greater than the total number of days in which a student is enrolled during the school year. And the target for the state is actually less than 5%. So that's what they're aiming for in terms of the chronic absenteeism rate. In the next table, I actually gave you last year's data just because as I was putting this together, I thought it would be really important for you to see the changes in one school year in terms of the percent of students who are coming to school, who are engaging in the learning environment. And I think this is great. This is the start of helping to continue to get us to recover from the effects and the impacts of the pandemic. What I do want you to notice is if you're taking a look at number 4A, which is chronic absenteeism for all students, that was a decrease of 6.1% from 2021-22. And then chronic absenteeism for high need students was actually even greater, was about 7.4% decrease. So it's showing us that the work that our school leaders are doing, our district leaders are doing to get students engaged in the learning process, get them in school every day, is working. Is there still room to continue to grow? Absolutely. You know, it's something we like to think of as it's a marathon, not a sprint. We want to continue to work at supporting this metric, and we'll continue to do work in this particular area. Indicator 5 looks at preparation for college and career readiness. And we're talking about coursework as well as exams for this particular indicator. And when we talk about that, we're talking about grade 11 and 12 students who are participating in at least one of the following opportunities. Students who are taking 2 or more courses that are advanced placement or ECE. Students who are taking 2 or more courses in one of the 17 state clusters for career and technical education. And we actually offer 11 clusters here in Milford. Some of those include things like marketing, STEM, information technology, finance. And each of those clusters is actually broken down further for our students into career pathways. So this is a little bit of a preview for what you'll see on April 8th when the team talks to you about our career pathway work that we're currently doing and we're looking to do into the future. And then also, anytime that there is a workplace experience course or an internship opportunity that's available to students. And as we talk about the first one being the exams, so SAT is another metric too that students can use to determine and demonstrate college and career readiness. When we're talking about the evidence-based reading and writing metric for the SAT, that's typically a score over 480. And then for mathematics, that's a score over 530 is representative of students that are demonstrating college and career readiness on the examination. And if we're talking about advanced placement, that's typically a score of 3 or higher on that, whatever that advanced placement course examination is. So for us here in Milford, from the prior year to this year, I will point out number 5, metric number 5, which is the percent of students taking courses. That was an increase from the prior year. So again, I think that goes to the work that our school counselors are doing, our teachers are doing, and encouraging students to participate in advanced and rigorous coursework opportunities. I know that it's something that our instructional supervisor team at the secondary level has been working on, is thinking about what opportunities are available for our learners to engage in some of that more challenging coursework, as well as the elective opportunities that are available to students. Obviously, the piece that we want to continue to work on is our percent of students who are meeting the readiness indicator on those exams. It's one area that I want to continue to work on. The next set of metrics talk about graduation. And the first one that I want to talk about is what's referred to as on track to graduation. And this is looking at grade 9 students who have completed at least 5 credits. And it's also important to note that a student cannot receive more than 1 F in a semester course, core course, English, math, science, social studies, to meet this particular metric requirement. Okay, so it's not only the credit attainment, but it's also the grades in those core courses that matter as well. We're also going to talk about the 4-year graduation rate, and this is exactly how it sounds. This is the percent of students that are graduating from high school within the 4-year window. The 6-year graduation rate also takes into account the high needs subgroup, and there's a couple different avenues that the state permits for students who are in that 6-year graduation rate. It's sometimes multilingual learners, If a student has financial difficulties that require them to work, there is also extensions given. And then also, as you've heard before, our students with disabilities that may enter into a transition program also will typically fall into that 6-year graduation category as well. And then the last one is the post-secondary entrance, and that is the percentage of students who are enrolling in either a 2- or 4-year program after high school. And I want to point something out that's very important for this particular one. This is the post-secondary entrance is any time during the year after high school. So that's why one of the reasons you'll see a delay in the score for this, meaning it's coming from a prior school year, is because we are still waiting on, if you're thinking about the class of 2023, we are still going through this school year, taking into account that we may have had some students who started a 2- or 4-year program in the spring. So that's why you will see a delay there with that one. The State Departments acknowledge that there are limitations to the data. It doesn't take into students that have enrolled in full-time employment after high school. It does not take into account students that have entered the military or may have gone into some type of an apprenticeship after high school. And you know that we truly value that all students are getting prepared for a path that they feel is going to create the greatest success for them after high school. So this is only a snapshot, a small snapshot of what our students are achieving and accomplishing once they graduate from high school. So with that said, I want to point out a few different pieces to you on here. As we talk about on track to high school graduation, this was about a 5% increase from the prior school year. So again, really showing that a lot of the programs that we put into place after the pandemic, especially at the high school level, whether it's the opportunity for during the school day supports or after the school day supports, more and more students are staying on track to timely graduation. And I will also point out as we look at number 8, 9, and 10. So let's take numbers 8 and 10 for a second. You'll notice that after number 8 and number 10, it refers to the 2022 cohort, or for number 10, the graduating class of 2022. We know that right now we're talking about the class of 2023. The reason why for the 2022 cohort, you'll notice that it's there in parentheses, is the fact that the following year, after students graduate, the data is typically not sent to districts. It's embargoed into the early fall, sometimes the late winter. Districts will actually get a separate email from the state to verify that those values are accurate. So it's often not present at the time that the state creates the next generation accountability reports. So you would actually see the class of 2023 as part of next year's next gen accountability profile. You'll also notice for number 9, it says 2020 cohort. And that makes sense because again, we're looking at a 6-year graduation rate in that particular one. So if we're talking about the class of 2022 in this case, the 6 years would be 2 years behind that class of 2022. So we would not have at this point the 6-year graduation rate for the 2022 cohort because we're still working towards that totality of 6 years. So I just wanted to make sure that I pointed that out to you. And a lot of this data is actually acquired not only from our public school information system, but also the National Student Clearinghouse also provides much of this data to districts too, and the state to determine the metrics for this. Promise you we're getting there. Physical education and arts access, which is indicators 11 and 12. We'll start with physical fitness. So physical fitness is assessed by what's known as the Connecticut Physical Fitness Assessment. And there are 4 different assessments that are subtests that make up this particular assessment. It's the push-up, the sit and reach, the curl-up, the mile run, or at the younger level, sometimes they'll give what's known as the PACER. And PACER stands for the Progressive Aerobic cardiovascular endurance run is the full blurb for PACER. And it's basically a shuttle run in format. It's designed to be a little more gradual and incremental than the mile run is. And the tests are really designed to measure not only cardiovascular fitness, but also aerobic endurance, upper body strength, as well as abdominal body strength and endurance as well. And students must meet either what's known as the high fitness zone or the health fitness zone in terms of making proficiency on this particular assessment. Now, one of the things that I will mention for the CPFA is participation also matters here. So when the state does the assessment calculations, they apply what's called a multiplier. So if greater than 90% of the students in that particular tested class participate, they multiply it by 1. If you fall below the 90%, so for instance, if you only have 70 to 90% of your grade level, take that tested grade level, they actually multiply it by 1/2. So it cuts your total next gen accountability score down for that particular indicator. So I will point out one of the areas that, as I talked to Dr. Gillespie and Mr. Smith, that we're continuing to work on is our physical fitness performance. You'll notice that our participation rate was at 77%. Also, our overall, our particular points earned is low as well. And some of that comes from the fact that last year we actually switched the way that the tests were reported. So before it was a lot more of the holistic total class data. Now teachers are actually entering each individual student's scores. And the nice thing about that is now we're able to run reports and generate reports to determine in a tested grade level which students have not been tested already. So we are able to follow up and make sure that we're getting as many students tested as possible. So again, it's work for us thinking about consistency in administration. That's some of the work that we're looking at this year, but also thinking about the test itself and preparation for that test. The final piece that I want to talk about here is the arts access, and this is students in grades 9 through 12 that are taking at least one course in the arts, whether that's dance, theater, music, visual arts. And we are continuing to do this work. Ms. Paris has done terrific amounts of work with our teachers to think about expanding voice and choice, the resources that are available, the elective courses and the arts that are available to our learners. Obviously, as we walked the facilities with you over the last couple of weeks, we talked about some of our dreams and hopes for opportunities for students in music. So we are excited about the performance there, but obviously there's room for us to continue to grow that as we go forward. And then as we conclude, so the way that the accountability index works is it's just like if you were in school. And if you remember a long time ago, your teacher would add up all your grades at the end of the term and they would divide by the total number of grades there, and that would give you your average for the course. They do the same thing for school districts as well. So I have given to you the comparison. Obviously, you'll notice that after 2018-19, there's a couple-year gap there, and that's because the state granted districts flexibilities during the pandemic to not have to go through not only standardized testing, but also the accountability measures as well. Right now, we are currently achieving about 73.6% in terms of our accountability index, which is higher than the state. And you'll notice that from 21-22 to 22-23, we had relatively the same decline as was seen at the state level. So, I think some of that is just naturally performance across the state. Obviously, I'd love to be back to where we were pre-pandemic, and that's the work that, as I go through with the supervisors and we start to take a look at curriculum and instructional practices, and starting to talk data with our school leadership and our teachers. This is work that we're continuously working to build upon and strengthen as you've seen some of the indicators that are not exactly where we want them to be, but have given us some great opportunities for growth as we move forward. So we're excited about the work that we're doing. Everybody is really fine-tuned and focused on it. So I think for us, the only way is up. I'm excited about what we're accomplishing, and I'm hoping that coming through the spring, we are able to see some of those initial impacts coming out of the classroom from our students. Final piece is what's known as the index gap. And this is another way that districts can actually receive a decrease in their overall performance score. And index gap is basically where students are over one standard deviation above the standard mean for the state. So I know that's a mouthful. So if you take a look at the next slide, you'll notice in the second to last column it says state gap mean plus 1 standard deviation. So if our size of gap exceeds that, that would be considered an outlier for a data point. And we would receive a decrease in our overall score classification. They give schools and districts a classification of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. That would cause decreases in that particular tested grade as well. The other doc that came out to you tonight is a more comprehensive doc. I think it's actually coming out to you now. This is the district's profile and performance report. This is an annual report that is published each spring, and it's a composite of all of our data from our staffing. It looks at breakdown of student performance by everything from race, ethnicity, gender, students with a disability, and also gives you some narratives at the end, which talk about our efforts to reduce racial isolation, our efforts to make sure that our schools are funded equitably. And as I mentioned to you, this is data that's pulled each year at the end of the year. And then my office, the Assistant Superintendent's office, writes the narratives that will eventually go at the end of the report. So this is a really nice way of kind of bringing together not only the next gen accountability measures that I talked about tonight, but also a more comprehensive outlook of some of our district scores. So obviously at this time I will turn it over to any questions that the board has that I can answer for you.
I have a general question, Mr. Altieri. So
Yeah.
just to confirm, you explained at the beginning the index
Yes.
rate. So is that the actual, like on chronic absenteeism, is that the actual percent of students who are chronically absent? 14.8, for instance, on page number. Or is that a wonky calculation that the state does?
No, I believe that is a direct measure of our absences.
Okay.
Again, percent of students missing at 10 or more school days over the course of the school year. Or 10%, sorry, 10%
Right.
of grade.
I'm always kind of stumped by the art access, because we have such a robust opportunities for kids to think that we don't have more students who are. So in that instance, it would be only 50% of our students are taking at least one course in the arts throughout their entire high school career. It strikes me as.
So it's only grades 9 through 12 for arts access.
Right, 9, 10, 11, and 12,
Yep.
high school.
So the challenge to that, and something that districts have been talking about for a long time, is there's limitations on the courses that can be used for the arts credit. So a lot of times things like graphic design, or if a school has, for instance, digital photography, which is aligned as a CTE course, sometimes the state does not count that in the metrics in terms of what is an art class and what's not an art class.
Okay. I know that's a popular course.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, so
First, following up on the absenteeism one, so for any reason, I see in the PowerPoint, and so the state doesn't differentiate folks who are maybe hospitalized with a sickness or out for medical reasons versus just not showing up to school?
I believe it's unexcused, and it's, again, the 10% or greater, so,
Okay.
yeah,
And if you had a doctor's note, would that then make you excused?
it would make you excused.
Okay, gotcha, thank you. And then the other one is, I imagine that it might be tricky to track, but, and certainly not us, probably more the state who have to blend it, but appreciate the tracking how many students post-graduation go to enroll in a secondary school. I guess, does the state track somehow how many of those students then go on to graduate from that post-secondary school?
So I can't 100% say with confidence. The National Student Clearinghouse tracks a lot of that data after students leave the high school, but I don't know, to the extent I can look into that for you, but I don't know to what extent they stop
Yeah, because
collecting data.
I realize it's probably hard to track the people throughout the course of their educational journey. And the reason I ask is especially with all the different opportunities that we're talking about and building a curriculum, as well as the ever-evolving landscape and also the cost of college tuition, I would love to, it would be great if we could, I wouldn't want to further perpetuate some of the challenges of kids enrolling in school, incurring debt, but then not graduating when there are other alternatives available to them. So.
Yeah, I know, Mr. Smith, one of the areas that they looked at quite in depth a few years back was persistence rates. So after students enroll, how many of them stayed within that program or that institution for a prolonged period of time. So I know that's one thing that they do track, but I'm not sure offhand if it goes all the way through graduation.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Muller? Ms. Muller?
Okay. Looking at the district's overall snapshot with this and how they compare indices so that you can, like you said, combine the different levels at ELA, so you get everybody's scales lined up.
Yeah.
Do they provide district level sub-data on the individual grade levels within each of these categories?
Yes. So you're talking about if you're looking at like
Like the
smarter
SBA
balance.
scores separately, how do those numbers compare along the same
Yeah.
categories here as opposed to district-wide smooshing everybody together?
Yeah, so we can look by grade level, we can look
Okay.
district totality, you know, and it also gives us opportunities to look by school. I mean, we can look at it in several different parameters.
Okay, I think seeing it broken down at some point by the levels, the
By grade
grade
level?
levels would be really helpful.
Other questions? Ms. Petrowski?
So I want to go back to the arts again. I may be misremembering this, but isn't art one of the requirements in order to graduate from high school?
So within the graduation requirements, it does fit as one of the courses in terms of humanities.
Okay. Okay, so it's just
Yeah.
part of, okay.
Yep.
Okay, it's not a specific breakout.
I don't believe so.
Okay. And then I had one other question on the preparation for post-secondary career readiness career readiness courses taken and exams passed. On the percentage passing exams, as far as I recall, we encourage as many kids as possible to take advanced classes. Is that correct?
That is correct,
Okay.
yes. Yeah.
So we're not cherry picking, the top 5%. We're saying everybody, prepare yourself, take an advanced class.
We push all of our kids to achieve success. We're not picking a certain demographic of students. It is designed to be making sure that whether it's students taking singleton courses or they're through a career pathway, we are pushing kids to take whatever is of interest to them. Looking at opportunities for some of that voice and choice, to take multiple AP courses in the same school year if they want to. So there's a lot of opportunities for kids to really customize and tailor their schedule to not only their interests, but also their career trajectory.
Okay. Yeah, I like that, actually. I think that's a great opportunity for all of our kids to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, we do have a really robust program of studies. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for kids to take, AP courses, ECE courses, you know, and even the electives. Just, there's a ton of different opportunities for students.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just
Great.
semantics, there's
Yeah.
no, why the stars on the female on both charts?
So that's what they call suppressed data, and it's typically if a metric has less than 20 students, they will suppress it just to protect confidentiality of, you know, if you're a really small district and you have, let's say, 2 multilingual learners,
Okay.
it may be very easy to track who that data is to a particular student. So if there's a low sample size, they'll suppress the data.
Yeah, no, it's 2,600 female, so that just seems strange.
Females
Yeah, I don't know.
There's stars there. That
You're
is-
talking about right here, the
Yeah,
very
the
first
front
page.
page.
Yeah,
There's-
that is odd.
You have to subtract the 5382 from.
I'm assuming it has to do with the non-binary students to help protect their
But it's
identity.
just,
No, the
it's just
female.
female.
The
Females
non-binaries
empty.
are start off as sort of
The
That's
very
just-
first,
I know, but-
yeah.
Like a data
glitch.
glitch, maybe, yeah. And then down at the bottom, chronic absenteeism too,
Yes.
same stars on all those too. Okay, just curious.
Other questions? Ms. Irby?
For the chronic absenteeism, the 10% is on the student's enrollment, not on the number of school days? Or which one is it?
I didn't get your question.
Is the 10% based on the student's enrollment or?
Based on the
numbers?
student's enrollment.
So
yes.
if they're half the year, that makes a
Yep.
difference. And then on the academic achievement, there's a science index, but not on the academic growth. Will the science be included?
Um,
Academic growth?
Yeah, so it doesn't look like right now the academic growth is done for science. It's just, right now, currently, it's just the performance index, so the achievement year to year. So it's probably something they'll look to add. It's only been around for a couple of years. It started right before the pandemic in 18-19, so it may be something that they're still working on establishing.
Other questions from board members? Ms. Doyle?
Thank you. Sorry, I got lost. On the graduation slide, graduates who are considered on track include freshmen earning at least 5 credits. Is this one that's measured at the end of the year? So in a typical freshman school year, how many credits does a freshman typically earn?
So the 5 credits is designed to align to the new graduation requirements of the 25 credits. So it's to make sure that students are meeting the credits that they need to eventually graduate on time. And to answer your question, Ms. Doyle, about when, it's typically towards the end of the year, we do a report that it's teacher course student that pulls a lot of that data in terms of how students have achieved in courses, grades that ultimately determine if they've met that particular indicator.
Okay, so if a student, you said a student who fails one class in that, if they fail a class in their freshman year, they can't ever fail another class and then get back on track, or without credit recovery, or what does that kind of work?
It's for the semester, and you know, obviously if the credit recovery, if they were able to restore a grade,
Got it.
it would then take the place of that grade of F.
My other question is, so I think you probably said this, but I missed it. In the 1 and 2 indicators, so the all students, do those also include all high need students?
Yes, it's
Okay.
all students, yep.
So then we're really, okay, I'm not gonna.
Yeah,
ask.
and then your high needs, Megan, is just your
Right, those
multilingual
individual
learners.
students.
Yeah.
So in some ways, we have to, and I'm assuming that the state adjusts, because to some extent, and I understand why the 1% difference is because you have students who are academically really performing, and you have students who are really at the low end, and they're kind of coming out to the middle okay, but we're really leaving behind students if we don't have that one standard deviation difference that's occurring. And then the physical assessment test,
Physical fitness.
yes. Can we, in our diversity, equity, inclusion, just make sure the kids who don't pass the test don't feel a lot of shame associated with that? I have vivid memories from elementary school related to that test. So it's interesting to see that now we're moving back into the individual tracking and going from there. So
I wanted to ask on that, so the participation rate was estimated at 77%. That was for the test itself.
That's for the total percent of students that are testing at each of those grade
Okay,
levels.
so why wouldn't someone be tested?
So, again, it's getting students enrolled in the test in a particular grade level. Again, I think for us, it's making sure that, so students typically in high school, for instance, have to test at one point during their high school career. So elementary and middle school, they test grades 4, grade 6, grade 8. So it's a clear time frame. High school can be any of the school years that they are taking PE. Most districts go for, say, grade 10. That's some of the work that we're doing to make sure that we have a set time of year that students are testing. This year, the window for assessment was opened pretty much throughout the whole year. So it's making sure that we have access to that PE data as we're putting it in, going back and making sure that we run frequent reports to make sure we're working with school counselors, building administrators, to get any student that needs to be tested. So
is it just timing sometimes?
It's just
Or
timing
high
sometimes.
school
Yep.
especially. Okay, thank you. Anybody else with questions? Mr. Smith?
Yeah, just one quick one.
Yep.
So back to the graduation and needing at least 5 credits. Very basic question. How many what are the maximum number of credits a student could take in a calendar year?
So it depends on, obviously, number of periods in the day, which I think, obviously they can take up if they fill every period. I'm just trying to think of a number offhand.
We have an answer in the audience.
Go ahead. 9. I was gonna say 8, but,
Yeah. Okay.
so, 9 credits.
With jazz band.
Okay.
Typical would be 8.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
so 8, but possibility for 9.
Okay, I just wanted to understand what the buffer was.
I wanted to make sure before I
Yeah.
answered, I knew, like.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yep.
Other questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Altieri.
Thank you, Ms. Glenn.
If any other burning questions come up, send them along, get the answers. Yep, we'll move on to policy work.
So this evening, we have 4 new policies for your consideration. It's first read, so we're happy to take questions this evening or as they come to you before the next meeting. They are 4 larger policies, so we just ask for your patience as we go through the details. Give Ms. Altieri here a minute to take some water and breathe, because he has the first one.
Yes. So the first policy that's in front of you for review this evening is policy 5118.1, which is homeless students. And you'll notice that this particular policy was last revised going back to the 2017, so it's been about 7 years. And the policy updates are designed to reflect the changes to a lot of the legislation since then. So I'll kind of just walk through a little summary of each of the changes that were made for your review. First, the 2 paragraphs that are in red, sandwiching the paragraph that's struck out, is really designed to update the definition of homeless students. So really it's a combination of, within the red text, is to replace that paragraph that's struck out regarding the definition of homeless. So the first paragraph talks about identifying homeless children and youth and eliminating barriers to their education, obviously in compliance with federal and state laws. And then going down to the third paragraph, which starts with further, talks about that we will not discriminate or stigmatize against any student because of homelessness. And again, keeping the next paragraph as is. Going down, homeless students within the district not placed in a shelter. Talks about the services for that child, and that is to continue in the school or school of origin, or the school of last enrollment, or provided in the school that's attended by other students living in the same attendance area. Homeless children, the next paragraph down, talks about they're provided educational services that are comparable to those provided to other students, and that's in alignment with other legislation such as Title I, McKinney-Vento, Gifted and Talented, Special Education, IEP services, ESL, and then obviously health services, food and nutrition. And the last paragraph on page 1 of 5 talks about the superintendent identifying a designee or a superintendent or designee identifying homeless children under age of 18 on a case-by-case basis if there is any reasonable suspicion of abuse. Similar process that we report it to DCF to make sure that that is addressed. Going on to page 2. Again, this entire page is an addition, and it talks about removing barriers to school attendance, and it gives several different elements for that. And that is that the selected school for the homeless child shall enroll even in the absence of records, so we don't hold a student from registering to obtain their records. Other enrollment requirements that could constitute a barrier of education for that homeless child could be waived at the discretion of the superintendent or designee. And if the district's unable to make a determination to a student's grade level because of incomplete records, we would administer some type of a screener or other assessment to determine the appropriate grade level for that student. Number 3 talks about any fees or charges which could present a barrier to enrollment being waived at the discretion of the superintendent. Number 4 talks about transportation services being comparable to those in other students within the same school. It's transportations provided to the school of origin in compliance with regulations. Number 5 talks about official school records and policies being waived at the discretion of the superintendent. Number 6 talks about the district making a reasonable effort to locate immunization records from the information available. The district arranging for students to receive immunizations through health agencies and at the district expense if no resources available. Number 7 talks about the district providing any homeless student who is not in physical custody of a parent or guardian access to their educational records, including medical records that are in the district's possession. And then number 8 talks about other barriers to school attendance may be waived at the discretion of the superintendent, and treating information the same way as we would with any other student relative to FERPA. As we go into the paragraph at the bottom of page 2, any homeless child or youth that's denied accommodations shall continue in attendance or be enrolled in the school selected by the child in the district. Information provided regarding the right to appeal the decision of denial is provided, and the homeless child or youth shall continue attendance until that appeal is decided upon. And then going down, talks about, in addition, if a homeless child or youth is denied school accommodations, they'll be entitled to a hearing conducted pursuant to that statute. Going on to page 3, at the top we have struck out, so it talks about the superintendent appointing a liaison for homeless children. We have struck out the liaison coordinating and collaborating with the state coordinator for the education of homeless children and youth. And then talking about the changes to that to say the liaison must assist homeless children and youth as described within the administrative regulations, whether it's enrollment decisions, use wishes, notice of appeal, and the liaison shall participate in state-provided professional development for liaisons. And then ending there, students residing in temporary shelters are entitled to free school privileges from the district in which the shelter is located. And the district in which the temporary shelter is located shall notify the district where the student would otherwise be attending. And that is to ensure that continuance of educational services are provided, including transportation and paying tuition to the district in which the temporary shelter is located. And then it does give, at the end, the superintendent the ability to develop regulations to accompany the policy in compliance with the statutes found detailed at the bottom of page 3 and going on to page 4.
I was confused under the last 2 paragraphs on page 2 of 5. If the policy is kind of laying out our responsibilities to educate a homeless child, when would school accommodations be denied?
I can look into that further for you and just see within the legislation if there are specific examples.
But it's when homelessness has not been established,
Okay.
or there is a dispute as to whether the family is homeless or not. But we can get more of an
Okay,
answer for you.
all right. It just confused me. It seemed out of sync with the rest of the policy. But understanding that it's required language, so. Other questions on this policy? Ms. Doyle?
Thanks, minor. We usually do the board, then the district. So in the first 2 paragraphs on page 1, if we can change it to, it is the policy of the Milford Board of Education, that paragraph, and then the Milford Public Schools will identify.
So switch the 2,
Yes.
switch paragraph, the red paragraph to make that the first paragraph?
Yes, and remove the word further.
Okay.
And then in the sentence, same page, homeless children shall be provided, limited but not, including but not limited to, nutrition programs, period. If they meet the established criteria for these services, can you turn that into a sentence instead?
Wait.
It says homeless children shall be provided educational services that are comparable to those provided to other students enrolled in the district. A bunch of programs, and then it says, comma, if they meet the established criteria for service. It just would be really easier, these are the programs we have available, the student still needs to meet the established criteria for these services.
Okay.
But I don't see that that's a complete sentence, really. You
No,
want-
I said turn it into a complete
Oh,
sentence.
okay, gotcha,
like,
all righty.
Write it. I think that was it. I also had a question on that Ms. Glennon brought up. So they're gonna continue in attendance at their school that they're currently in until they have the appeals process, is that what it is?
Yes.
So different from other processes that we've, like residency hearings or any of that sort of thing?
No, actually, that's the same with
Yeah.
residency. If they appeal residency, they stay put. It's usually a
Right.
stay put in the interest of the child.
Right, so, okay.
So that's a stay put also.
Okay, so it's basically saying, we deny you, you're gonna stay until we figure out the next level of what's going on.
That paragraph mostly applies to when homelessness is in dispute. Like,
Okay.
there isn't enough evidence, or there's a dispute between districts, like who's homeless.
Who you belong to?
Yes, right, so
Okay.
there is
Okay.
an appeal process if the parent and the district disagree on their status.
Got it.
So
Okay,
that's
that
language
makes more
that
sense.
protects the child and the district.
Right, okay, that was clarifying.
Ms. Muller?
Do we currently have a liaison for homeless children, or is that a will be appointed, or we're just putting it in here?
I'm the liaison.
You're always the liaison. Yeah, I could have guessed.
Usually.
Excellent choice. Okay, great.
Ms. Petrosky?
So I have, I don't know if this language is an issue or not, but on page 1, such services for the child may be 1 and 2. It kind of addresses where they would be living if they were permanently housed and where they might be living now. What, is there an accommodation here for if there's somewhat of a mobile aspect to that? Maybe they're mid-moving, that they're not always in one space. So it could be somebody who's homeless who is, you know, staying 1 week at one friend's house, another week at another friend's house.
It's oftentimes the case.
Okay, so is the expectation that a child would be moving from one school to another if they moved from?
No, that's not what that means, though.
Okay.
It's, we have to provide services for the child, continued in that school that the student used to attend to when they had permanent residence, or in the same attendance area where possibly homelessness is occurring.
Okay,
Gives
so
us
I was looking at where the homeless child lives and saying, boy, if they're changing residence, see, that might cause an issue. But the first one would apply in that case?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
We want to provide as much stability for the child, so
Great.
if the child was with us last and then they are experiencing homelessness and part of their instability is occurring outside of Milford, part of the law requires us to continue to educate the child here. So
Okay,
I think that fits the example you're thinking of.
yes, yeah. So the other question I had then on page 2 of 5, in that paragraph underneath 9, that first sentence is that the child who is denied school and accommodation shall continue in attendance or be immediately enrolled in the school selected by the child in the school district. So there's choice there?
What number are you in, please?
I'm in the paragraph under number 9, the
Okay.
first sentence.
Yeah, a piece of me wants to say by the parent, but yeah, there would be choice. There could be choice.
Okay. So should it be the child or the parent guardian?
We're gonna look into it, but
Okay.
I don't know if I want to ask the student if they want to go to school.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the parent makes sense,
Okay.
if there is one, but there is usually a guardian or an organization or institution appointed as one.
Okay. That was, oh, and I'm sorry, also on page 2, the first sentence, it says the district administration shall attempt, should that just be the district?
Great.
That was it.
Any other questions from board members or suggestions? Okay, that will come back for a second reading at the business meeting.
On to the next policy, we have an update to our graduation requirements.
So policy 6146, which gets into graduation requirements. Again, few updates on here regarding graduation classes. So, you know, first section just really talks about the responsibility to educate all students, again, connected to assessment criteria. High school credit for completion of coursework earned from an institution of higher learning. So we talk a lot about the dual enrollment work that we're doing in district. Striking out the credit distribution for the classes of 2019 and 2022. And going on to page 2, updating that from graduating class of 23 to 24. In red, we've also added in the graduation requirements for the graduating class of 2027 and beyond. Again, making sure that the personal finance course requirement is in there, which is new to the legislation this year. Going down into the next section on eligible credits, determination is at the discretion of the board. And, you know, again, adding in a piece too around graduation during a period of expulsion, or applying to any student through the planning and placement team process. Going on to the top of page 3, again, this is talking about the ability to earn credit towards high school graduation requirements, and it's adding in the language around middle school courses where applicable, sometimes math courses at the middle school, constituting credit for high school. And then the world language requirement, again, in there as a piece through opportunities to earn completion of a course credit through a nonprofit provider, or passing grade on an examination that has been set forth by the Commissioner of Education. Bottom of page 3 takes out the credit for remote and online learning courses. And then going to the top of page 5, the section 7 on students receiving special education and or remedial services. It is talking about students receiving adequate support beginning in grade 7. And then it talks about some of the support services that are available, including everything from retakes of courses in summer school, students enrolling at a state system of higher education, students receiving a failing score, able to take a school year exam, and then also allowing students with individualized education plans to demonstrate competency. Section 8 talks about the exemption from the physical ed requirement, and talks about the student may meet the requirements of coursework through a parallel experience if they're unable to physically participate in a physical education course at that particular time. And then we also added in section 9 the awarding of diplomas, the opportunity to complete summer course or summer courses in areas where the student was deficient. And then lastly, going on to the last page, page 6, under section 11 on Connecticut Seal of Biliteracy, just some minor wording changes to shift from foreign languages to world languages.
I had a few things in this policy, and I can let's see. The first thing was on the page 2. You're correcting 2023 to 2024, and then it goes on to commencing with the class graduating in 2027. So what about 25, 26?
That should be 26, right? So graduating class of
24 should be 2026?
through, yes, through 2026.
Or 2024 through 2026?
Yes.
Okay. The top of page 2. Yes, 2024 through 2026.
Oh, okay.
And then the last paragraph on page 2 that goes into the top paragraph on page 3. So the last paragraph talks about only courses, it's in black, only courses taken in grades 9 through 12 inclusive shall satisfy the graduation requirements, but then we're talking about 7th and 8th grade at the beginning of the next page. So can we make sure that we don't have conflicts in there?
Are you talking about the paragraph that says only courses taken in grades 9 through 12, that one?
Yes, on page 2 of 7.
All right, we'll make sure that paragraph and the next one all align.
And then there's a sentence, let's see, again in that, oh, wait a minute. Long sentence that ends, 2 sentences starting with multiple pathways. All right, so then again, at the end, the same paragraph, it talks about multiple pathways. So it's a big, long run-on sentence.
Where are you?
So at the end of page 2, that same paragraph, only courses taken in grades 9, that starts with that.
The district may grant?
Second sentence says, the district may grant a student credit. And it just goes on and on and on and on. So if we could maybe break that up to be, break it up a little bit. And then on page 5, I'm wondering if the first paragraph in black can be struck, because I think the new red paragraph says the same thing.
That's right.
So if you could just make sure. And then the third sentence in the red, let's see, it's, previously listed, it would be, the third line. So the district will provide adequate support, blah, 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 for a student to complete any of the high school graduation requirements. I think that there shouldn't be a comma there, previously listed. The comma should be after previously listed. Did you see that, Elizabeth?
Mm-hmm.
And then, in number, Roman numeral 9, in that new language, something is missing. Successful completion of a summer course or summer courses comparable as determined by the principal to the subjects in which the student was deficient. Students who meet all the graduation, receive a diploma at the end of the year. Yeah, there's something missing in that sentence, I think. And then number 10 seems out of place there. I'm wondering if it should be earlier in the document.
Student success plans.
Yeah, because that really refers to the entirety of their high school career. And at the end here, we're talking about like graduation and high literacy and stuff like that. So it just seems like it's out of place.
We'll take a look at it.
That's all I had. Ms. Muller?
Question in section 11 about the seal of biliteracy, where we struck out some of the language, including the American Sign Language component. Is that because the seal of biliteracy does not apply to American Sign Language, or vice versa, it does not qualify? Just found it odd, since that's a new course that we're now offering and encouraging students to be taking.
Hoping to offer.
Hoping to offer.
Yes, we're not offering it yet.
Hoping to offer.
I think, Ms. Muller, the reason for that is in the new revised policy, the model policy, that's been taken out. That language was not in there anymore.
Okay. Given the fact that we as a district are hoping to offer that as a course, if it is still something that qualifies towards earning the seal of biliteracy, is that something we could potentially leave back in?
Sure,
Get all
we can take
crazy?
a look at it.
Okay. And then the other one is just a comma level note of, we struck section 3, so everything after that should be renumbered.
I think, going back, I think the definition has been struck, not necessarily the sentiment, but we'll look into.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. And renumbering, I heard you say.
Renumbering,
Yeah.
Other questions from board? Ms. Doral?
I bring up a smaller part. I don't know if it needs it anymore, just because it's world language, it's more inclusive compared to foreign language, and American Sign Language I don't see as a foreign language, even though it technically might fall in that bucket. I don't
It's
know.
recognized as a world language.
Right, it's a world language, but I wouldn't say a foreign language. It'd be more like, I don't know.
I think the question is whether or not it qualifies for the seal of high
Right,
literacy.
I'm
which
I'm
would be-
pretty sure it would, because otherwise why would we?
That's why we're asking the question, getting clarification.
Well, I would challenge that. I would still want to offer American
Right.
Sign Language if it, even if it didn't qualify for a special
Yes.
mark on a transcript. We're not going for the little seal, right?
I know.
So I would still want to chase after ASL.
Right. And then one district to board thing, board to district, in section 2, page 2, per statute. Eligible credits is at the discretion of the district, not the board.
Wait, page 2?
Page 2, first red paragraph,
Yeah.
under eligible credits.
No. We had a conversation about this. It is in statute that the board, that's the job of the board, that you determine eligible credits for graduation.
So
We
these,
actually had that internal conversation and looked at it, so.
So what you're saying is, if we as a board decided to do work and have a discussion about it, we could say 8 credits in humanities, is what you're saying?
No, you don't have that much power. Some of that is, some of the specificity written into language, but you could go above and beyond. So you
Okay.
can, you can go beyond the minimum outlined in legislation.
we
So
have
if you
in the
wanted to
past.
be,
10, not
you know, one of those districts say, no, we're gonna do 28 credits to
Got it.
graduate, right? And we feel very strongly that every child should take X, right? But
So then, if it is board, it needs to be Milford Board of Education. Parentheses board, because we didn't reference.
we haven't defined you yet.
No, it's been in there before. It's page 1 of 7.
Yep.
Oh, in the last
Introduction.
Fourth
paragraph.
paragraph. Okay. But thank you, we had that internal conversation as well.
Other questions? Ms. Petrowski?
So I want to kind of refer back to page 2 and 3 of 7, where we're talking about grades 9 through 12, and then grades 7 and 8, and we get to page 5 under students receiving special education. And that first sentence in red says beginning in grade 7. I'm just wondering if this is towards graduation, should it be grade 9? I'm not clear on how those are related necessarily. It could be that I'm totally wrong, I just,
So we'll go back and be much more clear about our language, but it is possible for middle schoolers to earn credit toward high school graduation.
okay,
Particularly, the most obvious example of that is mathematics, right?
okay.
We don't have other examples of that outside of world language, which we have to have a dialogue about. But that grade 7 leads me to believe that it's referencing like the mathematics earning of credits. But I had that already circled, Ms. Petrowski.
Okay.
After Ms. Glennon brought to our attention the conversation about page 2, I circled that to
Okay.
make sure that that even aligns here.
Me too.
Okay. Great minds.
Thank you, Ms. Glennon.
So we'll triple check
And-
that
And then
make
I
it more
just had a
clear.
couple of nits, sorry.
Do you want to give them to me afterwards? Or?
Yeah, that's fine.
Any other questions?
We're gonna have Ms. Stewart give the highlights of changes on 6159.
So 6159 is individualized education program, special education program. So the second paragraph was added in, that we provide special education for school-age children requiring special education, and the school district does not terminate, the services terminate when a child graduates from high school or at the end of their school year, when a child reaches age 22. Also, through new law, this child at the age of 22 stays for the entire full school year and does not stop when they turn 22. And then in legal references, under the definitions as amended by PA 06-18, if you go down to the third sentence, we added in 10-760, duties and powers of boards of education to provide special education programs and services as amended by June special session PA 15-5, section 277, and PA 19-49, and PA 21-46, and PA 21-144, and PA 23-137. And then following that, we also added in, as amended by PA 06-18. I think that is it. Oh, one more. Under court rulings, it's PA 23-137, an act concerning resources and supports for persons with an intellectual or developmental disability.
So in the first red paragraph, the first new paragraph, I don't think we need the numbers there, because I think in accordance with the regulations of the State Board of Education, each local and regional Board of Education shall, it should just be provide special education for school-age children requiring special education, period. And then taking out the 1 and the 2, because it could just be a new sentence. The obligation of the school district under this subsection shall terminate. And then, oh, wait a minute, 'cause I have this on my phone. I think there's let's see, during which the student turns 22, I think that the comma after the year, the school year, it should just, I don't think you need the comma there, during which the student turns age 22. And I'm actually wondering, let's see, was wondering if those two paragraphs could actually just be combined into one. It seemed, I had, in accordance with the regulations of the State Board of Education, each local and regional Board of Education shall provide special education for school-aged children requiring special education, period. All students remain eligible for special education services under the Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEA, through the end of the school year during which the student turns age 22, or until the student graduates from high school with a regular high school diploma, comma, whichever occurs first. And the obligation of the school district shall terminate at that time pursuant to the Connecticut General Statute 10-259. The school year is defined as July 1st through June 30th.
You'll be sending that
I'll leave that
modification,
with
right?
Pam. And you guys can decide.
Thank you.
Ms. Doyle?
So just for my own clarification, on shall terminate when such child is graduated from high school at the school year when they graduate from high school. So there are special education students. Okay, never mind, I answered my own question. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I just have one.
Yes.
Did we want to add in on page 1 of 2, in accordance with the regulations of the Connecticut State Board of Education?
Oh, sure. That would be nice. Mhm. That makes sense to me. Anything else on this one?
All right, and Mr. Altieri will share highlights from 6172.6.
This is the policy on remote or online learning. A couple of the additions that have been made are revised definitions for not only remote online learning, but also dual instruction. So the definitions have been modified there for both of those. And going on to the top of page 2, this describes that in order for these courses to meet the requirements for high school graduation and completion of online coursework, it details out several of the key parameters, including the workload levels, including the staff who are teaching those courses and the requirements of them. And it also talks about some of the components of the coursework in an online environment. The paragraph that follows right above attendance and engagement through remote and online learning talks about should a district's dropout rate exceed 8%, the district has to then create an online credit recovery program and obviously identify students to participate in this coursework to satisfy high school graduation requirements. The remaining pieces going on to page 3, there's one paragraph that was added with regards to dual enrollment for implementation of a student's IEP or 504 plan. And then the rest of it is, as you'll see throughout, are just some additions to language, tweaks to language to include remote online to follow the title of the policy. And I'm happy to answer any questions or any suggested modifications.
Any questions on this one?
Right.
Ms. Petrosky?
So for the first sentence, actually, we can keep it that way, never mind. So on the page 2 of 5, the second bullet, it says State Board of Education. Should that be the State Department of Education?
Yeah, Connecticut State Yeah, it should be Connecticut State Department of Ed, right?
So that's CSDE, then later on, because you've added that in, you've identified in the third paragraph from the bottom on the same page, we've done with, in line with the Connecticut State Department of Education, we could just do CSDE there.
We'll make the appropriate update in the third bullet.
That's all I have.
Anything else from anybody? All right, so I think that's the end of the policy work, correct?
It is, thank you.
And we, these will all come back at our business meeting for a second reading and potential adoption. All right, we move on to the next agenda item. We have a
Yes, thank you, Ms. Glennon, members of the Board of Education. We want to take this opportunity to just give an overview as to where we are right now in the budget process. That is for the 24-25 proposed budget that the Board of Education approved in January. So while we don't have plans this evening to go into details and specifics, Mr. Brennan is going to give you an update as to what occurred at the Board of Finance meeting and how we will be proceeding forward.
Thank you, Dr. Kataya, Ms. Glenn, members of the board. Appreciate the time this evening. So like Dr. Kataya mentioned, we wanted to just take this opportunity to review the process moving forward. So as many of you are aware, at the Board of Finance meeting on Wednesday, March 20th, 2024, the Board of Finance made a reduction to the Board of Education's proposed budget in the amount of $1,335,429. And this represents a total budget of $109,950,341. At the meeting, I believe it was stated that this represents a 3.5% increase to last year's budget, but it actually calculates to a 3.44% increase from last year's budget.
So please make that correction in your board agenda item form. We were using a number that was stated out loud, but it actually represents 3.44.
So at this point in the process, much like the Board of Finance process, the Board of Aldermen will hold a public hearing, and then they will follow up with individual meetings with different city department heads and the Board of Education administration representatives. So after these meetings, and once they hear all the different needs that are set forth from all the different departments, the Board of Aldermen will vote. In order to reduce the amount of money that is moved forward, the Board of Aldermen need a majority vote. In order to add any amount of money back into the budget, they would need a 2/3 vote in order to restore or add any money. I just wanted to mention that a cut like this, so far in the process, is a very deep cut, and everything is a consideration at this point, and that's something that's going to take a lot of time and consideration in order to determine where that cut would come from. So based on the Board of Finance's current cut and the upcoming Board of Aldermen meetings, the Board of Education may need to meet to discuss the potential next steps in this budget in order to finalize it and approve it. And once the Board of Aldermen make their final budget, and at that late May, once that happens, then they have the city's final adopted budget. And at that point, the Board of Education would meet again, and then we review each line item to determine what the finalized amount would be for each one of those different spots. And then we have our adopted budget, our final adopted budget.
So we normally would not be talking with the board about our budget at this time again. It just leaves your hands, goes to the Board of Finance, goes to the Board of Aldermen, and then there's a decision made, and this board would take on formally the dialogue of the 24-25 budget later in May, after the Board of Aldermen have voted. But similar to last year, this year we're looking at a deep cut. A $1.3 million cut, potential cut to the proposed budget, can't just be figured out by this board in the third week of May. We would need a much longer lead time than that. Hence, conversations at this table, even before the Board of Aldermen take on the topic formally, so that we can publicly discuss what we believe the impact could be based on a $1.3 million reduction. Where we've already started the dialogue, albeit we didn't really want to pull out all of last year's spreadsheets. That's where we're starting. So to me, this means that we are going to put everything on the table. We're going to put all the new initiatives that are proposed in the 24-25 budget. And we're going to take a look at all options that we were looking at last year. So a place that we're starting is we're pulling out the spreadsheets and we're updating them right now. We're also costing out all move forward. If it's a move forward only, being able to propose to share that number with the board to ensure that everyone knows what those costs would look like. And then also understanding what possible initiatives would not move forward and what still possibly could. So we're starting with a couple of things, just to be clear. All of the initiatives that we are proposing that are new, that would be above and beyond this year. We are considering a simple move forward budget with nothing new. And then we're also pulling out all of our documents from last spring and updating everything, because those numbers can't be the same, right? Their salaries are different, costs have increased, et cetera. And asking ourselves, are those the same things we want to consider? Because we're a year later, right? We've done things, we've grown, we've experienced different things. So we're starting with those spreadsheets as well. So that is where internally we're working. It's primarily a district conversation right now. We're not digging into the building level just yet, because we feel like as a cabinet we have some responsibilities to take a look at all those numbers first. But we would recommend to this board that we have some open conversations. Of course, that's at your will, to put this on the agendas before Board of Aldermen vote, so that we can have, we need time to prepare for a $1.3 million cut. This is not just a trim around the edges, these are cuts, big ones. So that is where we are right now with our process, and we just ask that the board consider adding these to agendas or having special meetings between now and beginning of and middle of May.
Do you anticipate being ready with some information by April 8th, the business meeting? Which
If you put it on your agenda, we'll be ready.
I will.
We have a sense of urgency, Ms. Glennon.
Correct, yeah. Just recognizing that it's coming off of a school holiday week where a lot of people might be, a lot of staff might be away. So you could be ready on April 8th. If that's the case, I would say we should start that conversation on April 8th. And then I think go from there with whether or not we need to have, might need special meetings or not. I think after having that conversation on that day, and then go from there.
Yep.
I think it's important to note as well that, last year's budget had no new initiatives in it at all. It was simply a move forward budget with making those adjustments for inflation and contractual increases and contracted services and tuition and things like that. Whereas this year, we have begun again to address progress with investments and new initiatives. So it's things are a little bit different.
And fulfills what we've been talking about with our elected bodies, our families, parents, the citizens, that we are going to be budgeting based on program improvements. We're investing in programming, and programming that we know our students need to access in order to be better ready for their world. So I think the 24-25 budget is a great example of us fulfilling that word.
All right, so we will plan on that for the next business meeting, and then move on from there.
We'll put it on the agenda for the 8th.
Okay, thank you. We have public comment. Speakers may offer objective comments about school operations and programs. The board encourages speakers not to express personal complaints or defamatory comments about the Milford Board of Education personnel or any person associated with Milford Public School System. Security issues and matters relating to negotiations and grievances will not be permitted. Consistent with the principles of the Federal Education Right to Privacy Act, discussion of students is prohibited absent parental waiver. Public comment does not allow for two-way conversation between speakers and the board. We welcome and appreciate your comments and opinions, and all will be taken into consideration. Please note our meetings are televised and live streamed on YouTube. We ask that you state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes, and public comment this evening is limited to agenda items only. Do we have members of the public who'd like to make public comment tonight?
Good evening. My name is Bridget Kraus, and I live at 42 Nels Road. I am here tonight with my continued support for the Board of Education's proposed budget. I am still shocked by the Board of Aldermen and that they made a cut again this year with little regard to the impact that anything less than the proposed budget would have on kids. The most frustrating piece for me is that after all the opportunities the Board of Finance had for questions and the public comment provided, that mental health and social emotional supports in the form of school counselors were described as not vetted as a reason for cuts to the budget. I know I'm preaching to the choir in this room, but when I say if you are informed, watch or attend Board of Education meetings, these professionals and their impact on kids has been vetted. If you listened to public comment last year before the Board of Aldermen or this year in front of the Board of Finance, you heard the positive necessary impact that these professionals have on students. It is insulting as a parent of kids who have struggled and desperately needed these supports that the mental health of our kids seems irrelevant. Last year we saw the elected Board of Aldermen who were diligent in their role, and they were bipartisan support of funding for Milford Public Schools. Alders recognize the needs of students and that we can't continue to defer investments in our schools. It is unfortunate and insulting that we need it, but I look forward to that same diligence again this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to address the board this evening?
Please, go ahead. You're up before me.
Good evening. My name is Christopher Thomas. I reside at 8 Argyle Road here in Milford. To echo Bridget's statements, I'm here just to support you. I understand I'm speaking to the choir here. I do think you face a tougher road than last year, so I just here to ask you all to be prepared. I think there's a lot more politics than last year, believe it or not, even though last year was a mayoral election. So I'm here just to say, you know, and with that burden of the 10 votes will be greater this year than it was last year due to some of the political issues in town. I don't want to say I'm shocked at the Board of Finance because I was expecting the politics, but the cut they made equates to, you know, because everybody loves to talk mill rates and impacts, it would affect your average Milford taxpayer $85. It's an $85 difference between the proposed budget and the cut budget. So that's 25 cents a day. So I gather, and I would like to see this board and board members, although you're still citizens, you're allowed to speak publicly on things, and I am confident in the administration. I think it's time to be, not to play games, but to be even more aggressive than last year. Really ask them why. Why this cut? It seemed like they made the cut to make a cut. I was in the room last week. It seemed like they made a cut to make a cut. Like, oh, look, with the Board of Finance, we got to make a cut. So if the Board of Finance sees this on YouTube, if aldermen see this on YouTube, or one alderman's here witnessing it, I think they just got to ask themselves, what are they doing? Who don't they believe? Because that's what it is. They're saying they don't believe somebody. So they're saying to someone, we don't believe these numbers. Because your numbers don't have a lot. You put off the initiatives last year as a way to couch things and make things run smoothly. We do live in a post-pandemic society. If any, I'm a teacher. You're wondering what the attendance issue is? it's statewide, it's nationwide, it's post-pandemic, it's changing values and changing norms. And the only thing school districts can do, the reason why my children went here and go here and more children need to move to Milford and go to these great schools, is because we need to push forward. If we're not pushing forward, we're not doing the right thing. I'm an educator, I've chosen to be an educator. I can, not here in Milford, I'm in another town, but I can tell you honestly, I fully support you. I hope people will come out. There's not going to be as many dramatic issues at play,
10 seconds.
but I really do hope people come out and support the budget. There you go, I nailed it, 3 minutes.
Good job.
Good timing.
Hello, my name's Mary Elizabeth Oak, also known as Emmy. I live at 30 Dorina Place. I am absolutely horrified, disgusted, and appalled by the decision to cut your budget. I'm 100% with you. I think one has to think of the repercussions on the next generation that's going to work. Are they going to be employed or unemployed? Are they going to have decent ability to think between the lines and have an opportunity to have a life like the rest of us that are older? And that includes all of us that are working or retired. I feel very strongly as a dyslexic. All my life, I succeeded. I was fortunate. There was money to make it happen. And I was in a country where I was classed as illiterate. I have a BA, 2 masters, and a partial PhD. And I rolled up from being a dyer in a dye house up to being second in command of the biggest carpet manufacturer of design in this country. If I can do it, I want to make sure the rest can do it behind me. Forgive me. With you.
Hello, Sky Cornell, 14 Von Celine Street. I have a lot of the same comments. I'm here in support of the proposed budget that this board put forth. We were here for the budget workshops. We saw all of the due diligence, the hard work, the many questions that were asked. And I feel that the result is really, it's fiscally responsible. It, it addressed needs that the students put forth. There were quality, student choice, quality. There's a lot in there for mental health and wellness, which so many people spoke about. And frankly, I just came up with the word disappointed, but it is really, it just feels like community voice was not heard on these issues. And it feels like just the priorities that we spoke about over and over again were just disregarded. So it's really disappointing. We're just here tonight to ask that as a community member who would really like to speak out on this issue, that we get like really clear, transparent information as you had laid out, Dr. Kataya, and we're really able to understand the ramifications and have the opportunity to really advocate for those priorities. And again, just thank you for the hard work that you put out, and sorry to see that we're back here again. But we look forward to the due diligence that the Board of Aldermen will be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to address the board this evening?
Hi, my name is Kara Flannery, and I live at 41 North Street in Milford. And first of all, I do want to thank you all for your hard work continuing to move our district forward with this adopted budget. As a citizen who voiced her concerns in last year's budget process, I was surprised by last week's Board of Finance budget vote. And like many people, last week I was disappointed, I was frustrated, and I was angry with these 3 individuals on the Board of Finance who, once again, wielded yet another significant reduction in your adopted budget. I mean, my first thought was, wow, this is deja vu. I mean, right down to the comments made and not made by board members. But the more I thought about this, the more I kept thinking how different this is from last year. For one, This year, so many more people who care about education in Milford now know their district. They recognize the importance of voting in municipal elections. They know who their aldermen are, and they're not afraid to contact them with concerns. There is also much greater awareness citywide over how responsible and conscientiously this administration and board approaches our school budgets and the meticulous investments that are made in programs that have been made over time in education. Parents who spoke out last year have even taken their advocacy to the next level. They've joined political parties, they're serving on town committees, and they have even been elected to higher office here on this board and on the Board of Aldermen. Mary Giannatasio's advocacy for education funding last year as the board's minority leader was a key pillar of his mayoral campaign. How can we forget those side toppers? Fully funded education. So for anyone feeling disappointed or frustrated or angry, thinking this is a repeat of last year, please know that every voice and vote did and does matter. We have every right to demand full funding for this board's adopted budget and to hold elected leaders accountable to their decisions. Your advocacy impacts our community in ways that go far beyond one budget vote. Yes, this is the same budget battle, but it's a different year, and today I'm looking at this with a newfound respect for the process and for where this takes us as a community each year as we discern what we value in Milford. And I'm looking forward to seeing where the process takes us once again.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Emmeline Harrigan. I reside at 107 Orinoco Road. To echo everyone else's comments as well, extremely disappointed that we're in a similar situation as last year in terms of having to defend the very hard and diligent work that you did to approve a budget. I just want to speak to last year's experience. I was probably the highest signature getter in our petitions, out there on weekends, every single play, school performances, out on the weekends on Saturday and Sunday at Cafe Atlantique. We were around the community significantly talking to parents, and it wasn't just the threat of Harborside closing, it was the threat of unique programming that's available for their kid, because every kid is different. Whether it was the languages that they love, the learning, the science labs that they loved. It was so many different things to different people, and it's very challenging to assume that these individualistic experiences don't matter to kids, and that you shouldn't be looking for a broad and diverse experience for our children. If I don't know what this year will bring, but if we have to be out there getting signatures again, I can presume that it will be similar conversations with parents about what matters to them. And again, it's not a cookie cutter experience. It's very unique and different. So I know that we've watched a lot of your deliberations as you very thoughtfully put together this budget. I personally support the work that you did and the budget that you approved. And I hope that, the Board of Aldermen kind of see the light again for really supporting this investment in Milford's future and Milford's kids. Education matters for so much more than just educating those individual kids. It establishes your grand list, the businesses that want to come here, property values. It's so much more. It really is kind of the lifeblood of the community, the strong education system. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to address the board this evening? Thank you all for coming out to make your comments. We appreciate it. And with no more public comment, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any objections to adjourning at 8:56?